A simple tent was set up, and the heads of state gathered. It seems that even renowned adventurers initially wanted to participate, but upon seeing the distinguished lineup of kings and famous figures from various nations, they felt it was beyond their capabilities and gave up. As a result, only carefully selected individuals were seated around the round table. If we were to introduce some notable figures. At the head of the table sat Luminous, the host of the gathering. She had taken responsibility for issuing the worldwide final declaration, and had volunteered to oversee the meeting. To Luminous's right sat Hinata, while to her left sat Luis. Behind them stood Gunter, dressed in his butler attire. Behind Hinata, Cardinal Nicholas was also present. Despite having shown indifference during the battle against Daggerel, he now seemed highly motivated since Hinata was involved. With a determined expression, he was fully prepared to be of service to her. Standing alongside Nicholas was Leonard Jester, the vice commander of the Crusaders. Behind him, 4 squad captains were waiting in reserve. After undergoing rigorous training within the labyrinth, their strength had significantly increased, and they were expected to be a valuable asset in this gathering as well. Seated next to Hinata was Xian. Although she had not yet fully recovered from the previous battle, she looked healthy. With an eager and fearless expression, she smirked confidently, as if nothing could intimidate her. Beside Xian sat Dagur, who had taken Daggerel's place as his representative. Behind him stood Basar, exuding an overwhelming presence that intimidated those gathered in the room. Perhaps this was meant to ensure that Dagur wouldn't be underestimated, but in this setting, it felt somewhat out of place. As representatives of royalty and nobility, Gazel, Yaum, and Masayuki were present. Gazel was accompanied by a man dressed as a martial artist Ajer, the reincarnation of Hakure's grandfather, by Kiyaraki. Ajer stood behind Gazel with an air of composure, his demeanor light and flexible like a willow tree, naturally maintaining his guard. Yaum attended with his queen, Ajer, as a married couple. Although Yaum was a hero, he was not fond of complex discussions. In this case, it was only natural for his wife, Queen Jer, who was more of a ruler than an advisor, to take the lead. Standing behind Yaum were Raisin and Grucius. Meanwhile, at the edge of the meeting tent, Sar and Gregory were also present. They carefully adjusted their angles to avoid making eye contact with Hinata. As fugitives, their situation was undeniably awkward. Though Hinata was aware of them, she had no intention of showing kindness by acknowledging their presence, and simply ignored them. Rather, she figured that speaking to them would only frighten them, so she feigned ignorance as if she hadn't noticed them at all. It was undoubtedly the best choice for both sides. Among those feeling similarly uncomfortable was Masayuki. More than anyone else, this former high schooler desperately wanted to escape the situation. However, as the leading figure among the national representatives and those who had responded to the call, he bore the role of a symbol of hope. There was no way his wish to run away would ever be granted. No one was more aware of this fact than he himself. That was why he had now entered a state of emptiness, gazing distantly into the void. Beside Masayuki stood a peerless beauty Velgrynd. Having used spatial link to summon heroes from various nations, she had been demonstrating incredible prowess, handling multiple tasks at once. Now, she had dispelled all her parallel existence, and was prepared to protect Masayuki. Behind Masayuki stood Venom, who had now taken on the role of a close friend. Naturally, Calgurio and Minutes were also present, standing rigidly like statues, unwavering as they dutifully fulfilled their responsibilities. Away from the round table, Ultima lounged in a single-seat sofa. On the small round table before her, tea had been prepared, with Zonda serving it. Varen stood by with a composed expression, though he had only just recovered from his exhaustion. Ultima's 2 closest subordinates had also worked tirelessly in the previous battle. From holding off Dino's group to their fierce struggle against the giant tribe, who were impervious to magic, they had barely had a moment's rest for their minds or bodies. That said, there was no way they could voice their complaints in front of Ultima. Such was the painful position of middle management. In comparison, Adalman and his group were taking things rather easy. Adalman and Gadra, both now appearing youthful, had taken seats at the far end, away from the round table. Behind them, Albert and Wenty stood by, chatting cheerfully. Even though a meeting that would determine the fate of the world was about to take place, they remained as relaxed as ever. But perhaps because their presence helped ease the tension, no one raised any complaints. Everyone simply accepted that this was how things should be. Those seated at the lower end of the round table were no different. The group, far removed from nobility, had the appearance of ruffians rather than dignitaries. And for good reason, they were the ones who controlled the underworld of human society. Seated as their representative was none other than Glenda, who had gathered the elite forces dispatched from 3 wise drunks, and arrived at this gathering. With the world facing a crisis, they had no choice but to act. Alongside approximately 100 direct subordinates from the Musketeer Corps, Glenda had selected only the strongest among the recently trained individuals to join them. The number of such elites totaled around 50. 2 of them were present at this very meeting. Standing behind Glenda were Gerard, the former leader of Green Apostle and Yang, who once commanded the battle-hardened mercenary group Black Claw, composed entirely of A-rank fighters. Those affiliated with 3 wise drunks were required to undergo a baptism in the Tempest. Though various adjustments were still ongoing, the members brought this time had all passed rigorous testing. Though their total number was fewer than 100, they had endured hellish training within the labyrinth, received specialized equipment suited to their abilities, and now possessed fearsome combat power. There is a collective name for these successful candidates. Their loyalty to 3 wise drunks was likened to faith, and they were issued an emblem with a water lily motif. However, Rimura jokingly referred to it as the badge of Suilen, implying those who serve drunkards. From this origin, the group came to be known as the Suilen faction. Though their assignments varied, this time, they had been urgently summoned from all over the world. Yang was the leader among them, a highly promising individual even respected by figures like Gerard and Glenda. Ain, a spirit master who was once Gerard's right-hand man and the former leader of Apostles of Vert, was outside, conducting a summoning ritual. She was trying to summon high-ranking spirits such as Flame Giant, Earth Knight, Water Saint and Wind Maiden, to the greatest extent possible. Although they looked like nothing more than a band of ruffians, they were undoubtedly a highly qualified elite group. As a side note, unlike Sar and the others, Glenda maintained a remarkably composed demeanor. Despite being in the same position as them, having betrayed Hinata, she had already moved on, treating it as a matter of the past. This difference in mental fortitude was what determined the stark contrast in their fates. Whether it was something to be admired or not, however, remained a subject of debate. Just as the meeting was about to begin, Velgrynd lifted her head. After asserting her presence and drawing everyone's attention, she calmly opened her mouth to speak. My elder sister White Ice Dragon Velzard and Demon Lord Guy's battle, but it was a casual way to start, yet it alone was enough to silence the entire room. While it wasn't as crucial as the fate of the world, under normal circumstances, it would be a major incident. And beyond that, this matter couldn't simply be ignored. After all, if Guy were to be defeated, Velzard could become a looming threat from behind. Humanity, as it stood now, had no extra resources left to prepare countermeasures. Everyone tensed, waiting for Velgrynd's next words. A third party's intervention has been confirmed. It was the last thing anyone wanted to hear, second only to the worst possible outcome. The worst, of course, would be Guy's defeat. Well, this wasn't as bad, no one could take it as good news either. Alas, just in case, was it assistance for Guy? Luminous spoke on behalf of everyone. Though she didn't believe it was possible, she still clung to a sliver of hope. Unfortunately, no. The room stirred with murmurs. No one had expected the situation to turn for the better, so the response felt inevitable. However, Velgrynd's next words restored their composure. Rest assured, Tensura has already taken action to uncover their identity. Hearing this, everyone felt a sense of relief. If she were an enemy, she would be terrifying. But as an ally, there was no one more reliable, such was the White Queen, Tensura. Ultima also smiled upon hearing the name of a worthy rival. Oh, I thought it was my turn, but it looks like I can leave that to you without any worries. Saying this, she acted as if the conversation was already over. Her ability to switch gears so quickly was impressive, but in this situation, it was the right choice. Leaving any lingering concerns could prove dangerous in the upcoming Great War. Luminous seemed to share Ultima's opinion and went along with her words. Well, that's true. There's no point in dwelling on it now, so let's get straight to the main topic. With that, she urged Velgrynd to continue the discussion. Receiving this cue, Velgrynd stood up. Before I begin the explanation, there are some individuals I should introduce. I believe some of you may already know them. As she spoke, Velgrynd activated Spacetime Link. In response to her summon, the ones who appeared were the captains of the Magic Knights, subordinates of Demon Lord Leon. We serve Demon Lord Leon. We are the guardians of El Dorado. After hearing about the world's situation from Velgrynd's summit, we have come to aid you. Captain Alris gave his greeting. The other knight commanders nodded in response. Although the scars from Feldway's attack had yet to heal, they were insignificant compared to the current global crisis. Thinking only of their own nation in this situation would lead to nothing but destruction. With that in mind, Alris and the other knight commanders decided to join the battle themselves. They were indeed concerned about El Dorado, but the citizens were resilient. Even after being continuously exposed to the nuclear magic of Primordial Yellow, or rather, Carrere, they had the nerve to treat it as mere entertainment. This time as well, they simply laughed and encouraged the hesitant Alris and his comrades, saying, "We'll manage somehow." Thus, Leon's most powerful forces had gathered here. So, here gathered the greatest forces under Leon's command. The instructor of the Knight Order, Black Knight Claude. The leader of the White Knight Order, Meadle. The leader of the Blue Knight Order, Oxine. The leader of the Red Knight Order, Fran. The leader of the Yellow Knight Order, Kizona. Including ours, a total of 6 knights had assembled without a single one missing. And there were others whom Velgrynd had summoned as well. Pleased to meet you all. I am Misor. I assume most of you have never heard of me, but I am one of the leaders of the demon. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine joining forces with humanity, but given the circumstances, we wish to contribute whatever little strength we can. Though it may only be temporary, I hope you can set aside any grudges for the time being. The one who greeted them with a smile was Misor, the foremost subordinate under Rain. She and her comrades had been assisting with the defense and reconstruction of Dorado, but they had now rushed to the scene in this moment of crisis. Or rather, since their king had been taken away under Guy's orders, they could hardly afford to sit back and relax on their own. Misor's colleagues, Skull and Ulrich, shared the same sentiment. If we were the only ones taking it easy, we might end up resented for it. Misery Sama wouldn't mind, but unfortunately, our Rain Sama. Even thinking beyond that in her heart would be disrespectful. It wasn't that Misor had any intention of slacking off. She adored their beloved Rain, and so she always gave her all, no matter the time or place. However, when she recalled the sorrowful eyes of Rain as they were taken away to a dangerous location, she couldn't bear the thought of staying somewhere safe, while only they had to suffer. Thus, she had volunteered of her own accord to join Velgrynd in battle. Ah, Rain Sama. Is she really going to be okay? Will she end up getting scolded by the great Guy Sama again, or worse, make him angry and end up crying? Such worries were endless. However, Misor chose to think positively. Rain was surprisingly resourceful in her own way, so she would likely be fine. For now, all Misor could do was pray for her master's safety and focus on the problem at hand. Meanwhile, there were also subordinates of Misery present. Khan, their representative, stepped forward to greet them after Misor. "'Tis for us to be taking an active role on the front lines. This is completely unexpected. Normally, fighting alongside others would be unthinkable." As he spoke, Khan briefly scanned the venue. Those gathered here were all powerful figures of this world. Even within this tent, there were individuals whose presence seemed questionable. But if one were to bring that up, Khan and his group would also be considered among the weaker ones. Even as demon lords, the former primordial lieutenants, who once rivaled the old demon lords in strength, were among the weaker individuals present. The idea of boasting here was absurd. Khan had never intended to curry favor, yet he couldn't shake the odd feeling of wondering whether they would even have a role to play in this battle. We might lose our ability to operate behind the scenes, but that's a problem for later. For now, let's prove just how capable we are. With that conclusion, Khan made up his mind. From the start, Misery's subordinates were all diligent and highly competent. While there were no outliers with overwhelming talent, their overall quality was exceptionally high. Aside from Georg, who was a member of the Crimson, they were also notably cooperative. Incidentally, Ulrich, another Crimson member assigned under Rain, had somehow ended up in the role of the struggling one. He had originally been an arrogant type who considered himself the best, but life worked in mysterious ways. There's a saying about how one takes on the color of their surroundings, yet Rain herself showed no signs of hardship. Most likely, Ulrich had simply adapted to his colleagues. After all, Rain's subordinates led by Miss Or were all extraordinarily talented. No, to be precise, they had initially been known for their laziness, and yet, for some reason, they all ended up becoming highly competent. Even Ulrich, who was once brash and full of himself, had now adopted a calm demeanor, blending into the background as if his presence had faded. He no longer showed any sign of asserting himself. That very transformation was proof of his growth, but Khan couldn't comprehend what kind of training could bring about such a change. As for Khan's own master, Misery, she simply remarked, "That's exactly what makes Rain Sama so incredible," offering an interpretation that made little sense to him. But perhaps trying to analyze it too deeply was a losing battle. In any case, with the right education, anyone could become competent. Determined not to fall behind, Khan wrapped up his greeting. "This time is special. We shall provide support to ensure that the unreliable humans outside do not struggle." With that declaration, he took a seat in the chair that had been prepared for him. Neither of his colleagues, Alban and Georg, had any objections to Khan's statement. The two stood quietly behind him, allowing the flow of events to take its course. Incidentally, under normal circumstances, the announcement of participation by the demon race would have caused an uproar. However, there was no such reaction from humanity's side. Since the instigator of the event was a demon lord, and even a true dragon had appeared as if it were the most natural thing in the world, there was little room for surprise at this point. At the Council of the Western Nations, Tensura had already gained significant recognition, so seeing Miss Or and the others did not cause much of a stir. Everyone simply accepted the situation with a hem, and the meeting proceeded without issue.